So the next thing that accounting management lets you customize is the charge logic, or the basically the formulas that tell LoadCall how to calculate an invoice or settlement. So in each of these, you can see that LoadCall comes pre-built with a bunch of these, which depend on the commodity types that you're transporting. But in here, these ones you can view and you can copy them, but you cannot delete them or edit them. You can create custom charge logics if you have different ways of calculating things, but the principles are all kind of the same. So these, if you refer back to the invoice application or the invoice rate sheets page, if we go into one of these, you'll see that the drop downs on this first charges page, these are the rate logics. So you can see, if you click on the magnifying glass, see how it's calculated. And by clicking on the drop down, you get access to all of the charge logics that are in the system here. So we're going to go ahead and create one of these by clicking on the new create logic button. And all you have to do is give it a name. So we're going to call it test charge in this case. Click save. And it is going to take us to this window where we can edit the logic path. The charge logic editor is probably the most complicated part of accounting management within LoadCall, but it is also the most flexible and where all of the magic kind of happens. So in here, a logic path is a set of formulas and conditionals that are used to calculate the line items on your rate sheets and for settlements and invoices. So we'll kind of go through and build an example here, but this part is definitely the most advanced, and you may need to talk to someone in support to make sure that you're setting these up correctly, since they can be a little bit tricky. But in here, we're going to go ahead and add a condition. So a condition is an if or else statement. What this basically means is that if some sort of condition is met, then we're going to proceed in this little branch right here, whereas if another condition is met, or if that condition is not met, rather, that we'll go and we're going to go down a different path. So a good example of this is we're going to do if the chain up count, or the number of times that has been chained up, is greater than or equal to, we have all these different conditional operators, greater than, less than, equal to, not equal, those sorts of things. If it's greater than, we're going to put in number and type in 1. So this now says if the number of times that a driver entered in a chain up event is greater than or equal to the number of 1, then we can come and create another branch down here. We can create a formula, or we can have another condition. So this allows for quite complicated systems where there are multiple conditions that need to be met, or if at any point there's a condition that if it's not met, it's billed one way, it's met, it's billed another way. So which is why there's a lot of pre-built ones in here, so you don't have to mess with this too often. But we can go ahead and add a formula right here, and we can either type in a number manually, or we can put in a actual measurement or a handful of other things. So this section is all of the measurements that a driver's putting in that you have access to, quite a few in there. These are the lookup constants, price per barrel or the diesel lookup were two that we built. And the accounting variables would be the section we are going to cover next. But essentially, this is just a kind of one-off variable that gets set on either an invoice or on a rate sheet. And then the last section down here, we've got some data that gets pulled from the Energy Information Administration. Typically, this has to do with fuel pricing. And you can see that we have a bunch of pads and things down here. There's quite an expansive section. But we're going to go ahead and use the already built accounting variables. We're going to do chain up fee since we're building a chain up logic, and we're going to just add 0 to it. So that's a pretty simple formula. So this so far reads, if your chain up count, or the number of times that have been chained up, is greater than 1, then we're going to charge out the fee. Otherwise, if there are no chain ups, we're just going to say 0, and then we're going to just, 0 plus 0 in this case, which means that there will be, 0, or it's going to be this fee right here. After you do that, you can go ahead and remove formulas if you want to rebuild it. It will warn you, so if you accidentally click on it, then you can make sure that you don't accidentally delete something that's taken a while to build. You can also go ahead and add steps. So if this is a multi-step process to calculate this, which it may be, then we'll go ahead and click add step, and we're going to use the previous step result in this case, and we want to divide it by, let's look up splits. So number of split tick, or total number of splits. We'll go with that one. So now what this is going to do is if there's a chain up event, we're going to take the predetermined fee from that. This one is a accounting variable, which means it's set on a rate sheet. And we're going to take that. We're not going to do anything with it. We're just going to add 0 to it. But then in step 2, we're going to take whatever this whole number is from this step, and we're going to divide it by the number of splits. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. This is one of the more complicated parts of accounting management, but it also is what gives it a ton of flexibility and allows you to come up with any sort of billing scheme or payout scheme that you need to come up with. It allows you to handle all of that. And it may take a little bit of help from support a few times to get used to it, or referring to the video a couple of times. The other thing in here, this won't get used very often, but there is this additional saved fields option. If you click on it, it is going to give you kind of this scary code looking invoice charge underscore tab delimited database key stuff. All that this does is it lets you take an intermediate value and save it into the database and use it on reports and things of that nature. This is hardly ever used, but it is useful in a few cases where if you have different ways of calculating mileages, you can say if there's reroutes, we need to sum this into it, or other things like that. This allows you to save intermediate data steps and use them in reports and things. You'll probably never use this feature. If you do, it's more than likely that you're going to talk to somebody at LoadCall support and make sure that it's set up properly, because this is another quite complicated aspect to this. But the overall take on this is that you can go ahead and put in any sort of logical chained conditions and algebraic or lookup calculations in here to accommodate whatever method you're using to calculate out your invoice or settlement charges. And with that, we'll jump on to the next section. So after we've gone ahead and customized this, we can click Save, which will make it now show up underneath the Charges section. We can see that we have our, our charge logics, our charge logic section. We have this test charge right here. And the last couple of options that you can do with it, you can edit it to get back to this same screen and change the logics. You can also go ahead and copy it, or view the logic in here so you can see exactly how it calculates, and you can read through it and say if the chain up count is greater than or equal to 1, we take our chain up fee plus 0 and then divide by the total number of splits, otherwise it's 0. So that's the view. The copy would allow us to make a copy and work on it. That's useful for some of these more complicated ones. Some of these rate per barrel ones can get quite hairy if we view them. You can see that the default ones take a lot of things into consideration. Loaded barrels, split tickets, standard distances, reroutes, things of that nature. So a lot of times if you wanted to take this and just change it a little bit, it's easier to copy it than it is to build it completely from scratch every time. And then the last thing is deleting if you are not using this charge. So we'll go ahead and do that.